Okay, following on from the lighting video, I just want to talk a bit about materials and how they interact with light. You'll see when I render it, boom, it's very shiny, right? It's very flat. If I put in a background, so here's one I made earlier, and then render that, actually doesn't look too bad, but the background will probably quite often appear to be, maybe if I back out a bit you'll see it a bit better, will quite often appear to be quite shiny too. Now that's concrete, that shouldn't be. You can see here all the reflections it's picking up down here. Concrete should not be that shiny. Concrete should be nice and, you know, concretey and rough. So when you bring lights into the scene, you do have to start worrying about things like this, right? And it's all in or most of it is in the material settings. So I've went over this in class, but just to remind you, if I go into my concrete material here, now we've talked a wee bit about some of these maps you can use, right? I'm not going to really bother about them just now. I'll talk more about them in more detail next block. But for the time being, if I don't want that to be so shiny, what I'm going to be looking at is the reflections and what's called the roughness, right? So if you move to advanced, I don't know why that's not in simple, it's a bit annoying. But here's reflections, right? Reflections, I don't want this to reflect at all, right? Concrete is not a reflective surface. So I'm going to put that right down to 0. And you'll see when I render out now, there's no reflections in that concrete. It is much, much rougher looking than it was. But it's still a wee bit shiny looking. You can't really make it out, but I can see here there's a wee bit of shininess. So, and along the edge, I mean, it's not showing up to be the best example, to be honest. But if I want it to be less shiny, what I'm going to go in is I'm going to affect this roughness here. So roughness is basically how much the light gets spread over the surface of it, right? We'll pick something a bit more obvious, right? Let's pick this black casing here. So if I render that just now, you see it's very definite, it's very reflective. You can see the reflection of the barrel there, you can see the reflection of the sight. Very reflective, and I want it to look a bit rougher than that, right? I don't want these wee highlights going along the edge. It looks a bit smooth and a bit kind of plasticky almost. So I'm going to go into my material here. I'm going to do the same. I'm just going to go to advanced. I'm going to turn reflection. Don't want it to be totally unreflective, but I'm going to turn it right down to 0.2. Let's go to. There's no hard and fast way of judging this. It's just trial and error until you get used to it. And then for the roughness, I'm going to put that up quite reasonably high. I'm going to go to 0.7. And hopefully that'll make it look a wee bit more kind of metallic. So let's render that out. You can see there that the highlights have gone away, the reflections have gone. It's looking a lot flatter, basically, which is kind of what I want. Now I could embellish that with, we talked about bump maps and normal maps. I'm not going to really go over them because I don't really need to know them for these units. But I could use that, but just as a quick way to get the shininess of things down, you're really wanting to go and look at the reflections and roughness settings here. There's obviously way more. I mean, you've had a look at these materials, there's rakes and stuff. So there's loads of things you can do to make it look more metallic. There's actually a metallic setting on other materials. I don't think this has it, does it? Roughness, I don't think standard material has it. But what you might have done is you might have used, this is kind of an aside, you may have used one of these settings. And that's fine, that's perfectly cool for you to do. But what you may also have noticed, if I say I'll use polished aluminium, right, and I'm actually just going to hide this background because that'll prove my point a wee bit more. Oops. Hide. I want to hide you. Hide selection. So if I render that out now, that's actually pretty good. So this is the aluminium setting here. That worked. Everything worked better than I want it to. It's really annoying. I would have changed that from aluminium to glass because that'll really show off, I think. In fact, let's go to silver. That might work. What I'm trying to... Yes, here we go. So I've changed that to silver, right? It's really shiny. but it's turning out totally black. And a lot of people have had this problem, right? The problem is it's a very reflective surface, and it's only reflecting what's around it. And what's currently around it is black. Black, black, black void. If I put my background in, so I'm going to unhide all, and then render it, you'll see now that it's reflecting the background around it. This is still reflecting the black from the void outside. So when you're working with highly reflective surfaces, it's worth bearing in mind that it will reflect what's around it. And if what's around it is black, then it's going to be black. If I go in and change the environment setting, so we'll talk about that in the next block, but if I just push number 8 just now on my keyboard, you bring up the environment setting, you can change the color. So let's change it to, I don't know, kind of dark grey, sort of battle, dark bluey grey, don't know, battle grey, is that a thing? And you'll see now it's now reflecting blue because the environment around it, is blue. So that's worth bearing in mind if you have a very reflective thing that's not quite working what you want. That's just a wee aside, really. So something to worry about. You shouldn't really have to. I mean, you can just use bitmaps for the time being. Where, as I say, we will do more materials as time goes on. Okay, so that's just another wee thing. Have fun.